Well, that was sobering.
Pointed at the projector.
Pointed at the projector. Okay, there we go.
There we go.
So, so this is a presentation I put together because I had heard things, read things, seen things, and I felt that DNA showed a different answer. And so I put together a presentation that would address some of those anti-Semitic concerns. So we may go from one form of anti-Semitism to another form of anti-Semitism, but the basic anti-Semitism we can't avoid. I've been a genealogist since I was a boy, so that takes us back to the mid-60s. About 3 months before my bar mitzvah, my grandmother died. And we went to the cemetery and for the funeral, and after the service, my father took my hand and my mother took my brother's hand, and they walked us through the cemetery. We went and visited their relatives. And I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and I had no first cousins, and I had second cousins, a couple that I really didn't know. In other words, I felt isolated. I had one grandmother in Omaha, Nebraska. My mother's father had passed away when she was a little girl, so I never knew that grandfather, and the other grandparents lived in Minneapolis, so we only saw them for, bar mitzvahs and that kind of stuff. But that night, and you can imagine this, when everyone came to my parents' house for the Shiva call, I was the little kid walking around to all the old people, primarily women, saying, only if they had accents, saying, tell me about your family. Where were you from? And so on that day, I drew my first genealogical chart, and this is it from 1965. You can see that there's no pointer here, but you can see that, someone said, oh, I know she died in 1896 and she was 39, so that means that she was born in the 1850s. We just wrote it, they just scribed it on there, and that was it. Just to give you an idea, through the miracle of something called yearbooks.com, one of our customers at Family Tree DNA thought it would be humorous to show everyone what I looked like in 1960. And so now I'm going to fast forward to the 1990s, before the DNA industry had started. There was a study in 1997 that used Leonard Nimoy as a picture. It was a study of the Kohanim. Some of you may have seen that study. I was captivated by that study, and I immediately wrote to the people at the University of Arizona in Tucson who had done the study, saying, I'm not a Kohen, but if you need someone to do a DNA test, I'm your guy. Just contact me. Well, they didn't, of course. So for those of you that aren't familiar, the Live Long and Prosper slogan was something from the set of Star Trek, and in his book, Leonard Nimoy says that when they figured out on the set that they needed a something to represent the Vulcans, he said, I got it, it's this, because he was mesmerized by the chanting of the Kohanim when he was a boy. Now, what are we going to talk about today? Very, very shortly, we're going to talk about what I call anthrogenetics, historians' claims about the origins of the Jews, who are the Jews on a genetic level, and can molecular biology answer previously unanswerable questions? So let's start on that. Just as a very, very brief, this is DNA. You have your chromosomes in the center. We have 22 of them. Those are called the autosomes, and they recombine in every generation when a man and a woman get together and procreate and have a child. Outside of the nucleus of the DNA, you have what's called mitochondria. Mitochondria, in effect, produce energy for our cells, and our cells give the mitochondria food, so it's a good symbiotic relationship.
They are firing for the military things. They're firing.
Okay.
Oh.
So I'm getting like a,
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
salute. I like that.
Congratulations.
So just real briefly, we have these autosomes, 22 pairs, as I said, right there. We have then the sex determining chromosomes. Everyone has an X. Women have 2. Men have a Y chromosome. You can see how small and demure it is. And ladies, when you think you should pick on us, just remember we have small Y chromosomes. So very briefly, what kind of DNA can you use to interrogate yourself to understand more about your history? We have the Y chromosome, which is passed from a man to his sons. There's no recombination, so there's no fuzzy signal that you get. You just get your Y chromosome. I've got my Y chromosome from my dad, who got it from his dad, who got it from his dad, who got it from his dad. Mitochondria works the same way, passed down from a woman to all of her children. The girls pass it on to the next generation. And then there's the third type of DNA, which is autosomal DNA. That's the 22 chromosomes that we talked about. That's like having, in effect, 2 decks of cards that you shuffle. A red deck, a blue deck, you shuffle it once. That's your first child. You take that same red and blue deck, if you're still with the same guy, ladies, and you know, that's your second child. The children look similar because they come from the 2 same decks, but they don't look identical because when you shuffle, unless you're a croupier in Vegas, it's not red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. It's red, red, blue, 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 red, blue, something like that. And when you shuffle again, it's not identical. So your children may look similar, but they don't look identical. And just as another way of explaining this, my great-great-grandmother, passed her mitochondria on to my grandmother, who passed it on to my mother, who passed it on to my sister and to myself. Whereas on the Y chromosome side, you're looking at the great-grandfather, the grandfather, the father, and the brother. And so when this industry started, when I sold my first DNA test in May 2000, all we had available for the public was the mitochondria, which worked on this side, and the Y chromosome that looked at the male side. And in effect, if a woman was interested in her father's, let's say her father's line, if she didn't have a brother and her father was dead, then in effect she was what we call daughtered out, and she couldn't do that interrogation unless she could find a distant cousin. That's why this autosomal DNA testing that 23andMe pioneered in 2009 became so interesting because, as Brad knows, as we had a t-shirt, I don't have it, I have it on my phone, but what it meant is sex didn't matter anymore. Whereas this was very sexually related in that you had to follow the rules of science. Now, this is called a phylogeny. A phylogeny is a theoretical construct of how evolution has taken place within a species. So if I had a pointer, I don't think there's a pointer on here, I would point out that Homo sapien is, let's say, 100 to 200,000 years old. You have the branch A, as you can see, and then there's a separate branch defined by M42 that would give you branches B, D, and E, and then you have other branches which keep coming down here and breaking off. And there are about 22 branches of the tree. If I know, for example, that someone is Finnish, then I know that the likelihood that they are from haplogroup N is exceptionally high. If I know someone is in haplogroup J, then I know their origins are Middle Eastern. When I say origins, I'm talking about 5 to 10,000 years ago. If I know someone is haplogroup branch I of the tree of mankind, then I know that they were early in Europe, and they're predominantly found in southeastern Europe today.